Greetings, urban farmers, gardeners, and healthy food visionaries. Farmer Greg here, and welcome to the 631st episode of the Urban Farm Podcast, where every day we work together to educate and inspire you to become part of your food revolution. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, then you probably heard me talk about our Edible Backyard Summit. It's a 3-day online food growing inspiration and education event that brings together thousands of people to learn practical tools for living healthy, self-sufficient lifestyles and growing your own food. If you enjoy the Urban Farm Podcast, then I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to love the Edible Backyard Summit. It's just like the podcast because it's free and you'll learn a lot from experts in their fields. And unlike the podcast, you'll get to see the presentations on your screen and have your questions answered live. The upcoming Edible Backyard Summit airs live September 14th through the 16th with informative presentations that food growers of all kinds will enjoy, whether you are an aspiring newbie or a seasoned expert, and whether you live in an apartment or have acres to grow on. And for this upcoming summit, we're going to do something a little bit different and special. The September 2021 Edible Backyard Summit is Best Of themed, meaning that we're going to be showing listener favorite presentations from the last 2 years. These are the cream of the crop presentations that people couldn't get enough of, and this is the only time and place you can watch them for free. You'll learn about some of the best plants to use in an edible landscape, regenerative composting techniques, patio farming for small spaces, how to build healthy soil that makes your plants grow like crazy, an ergonomic straw bale gardening technique, and lots more. To sign up for free, head over to ediblebackyardsummit.com. And if you have friends and family that love to garden, please invite them too. This is a great opportunity to do something fun virtually with other food growers in your life. If you're ready for some fall gardening inspiration for your most vibrant, healthy, and self-reliant life, I invite you to join me for the Edible Backyard Summit. Sign up at ediblebackyardsummit.com and get ready to create the edible yard of your dreams. Today is Farmer Friday, a quick gardening tidbit. Each episode will feature less than 10 minutes of essential content for your growing success. Today, we're talking with Nicole Gennetta of Backyard Bounty Podcast about what to feed our laying hens. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, Greg, for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I was on your podcast recently,
Yes.
interviewed, and we had such a great connection. It's like, oh yeah, bring her on for that. And so today we're going to be talking about feeding chickens, and then we'll also do one on bees. So look out for that one as well.
Yes, definitely.
So what do we feed our chickens?
Sure. So, depending on what kind of chickens you're raising and how old they are, they do have different nutritional needs. So when starting out, if you start out with chicks, they would need to be fed a chick starter feed, and that's going to be about 20% protein. So that's specially formulated blend to help your little chicks grow up big and strong. And then once they're about 6 to 8 weeks old is probably the earliest, but most people would recommend closer to the 18 weeks when they start to lay. You can switch them over to a layer feed, which has a lower protein since they're done growing. So that's going to be a 16 to 18% of layer feed. So that's kind of the 30,000 view of it, and then there's a little bit more specific that we can get on that as well.
Yeah, so the higher protein helps them make feathers and bones and really build their body, because they're going from chick size to teenage adult, which is what, a 3-pound, maybe a 3-pound chicken in like 8 to 12 weeks, right?
Right. Depending on the breed and whether you have a bantam or full size, they can be as small as 2 pounds as adults or upwards of closer to 6 to 8 pounds. They grow very fast in a short period of time, so that 20% protein helps them to grow up big and strong and make sure all their bones and things develop properly.
Nice. And then it comes to the treats, because I know Heidi, my sweetheart, loves giving her chickens treats, and there's a whole myriad of things that we can give them treats about. And maybe because the list is shorter, let's talk first about what not to feed them.
Sure. This is a question that I get asked regularly. People will find either their kitchen scraps or maybe some leftovers in the fridge and, not really sure if they can feed it to their chickens. But chickens are omnivores, so they can really eat just about anything, and they're naturally pretty good at avoiding things that they shouldn't eat.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, they're pretty smart on that. But to kind of just run through a list of some of the more common foods that you should avoid feeding your chickens: alcohol, raw amaranth, which I have a hard time saying.
Hold
Avocado.
on. Raw amaranth?
Hmm.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
it contains some growth depressing anti-nutrients, so
Oh,
not so good for them. Cooked is fine, but raw should be avoided. Avocado, a lot of animals should avoid the avocados. Butter, chocolate, citrus, things with caffeine like coffee or tea. Dry beans, cooked beans are okay, but dry beans should be avoided. Eggplants and pepper, just the leaves, the fruit is
right.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's bad for us, such as fried food, should be avoided.
Right.
Maggots, and where this comes into play is if the chickens get into the compost bin. If there's fly maggots in there, they can get botulism.
Really? I
Onions.
hadn't heard that
Hmm.
before.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's semi-common. Sometimes it can just make them sick, and other times, unfortunately, it can be fatal.
Hmm.
So keep them out of the compost bin. Onions, raw chicken, and raw eggs. I know that one sounds strange. They can have cooked chicken, as weird as that sounds,
Uh-huh.
and cooked eggs is actually pretty good for them, but raw is not. They could get salmonella and things like that. You should avoid rhubarb, stone fruit pits, and apple seeds. So your fruit trees, they can eat the fruits, but not the
Right.
pits and the seeds.
Although
Another.
usually on stone fruits, the pits are big and they're not going to do much with
Right.
them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd hate to see one try to eat a peach pit.
Right.
That'd be a bigger problem. Another one that gets pretty confusing for folks: red tomatoes, perfectly fine, but green or unripened tomatoes and the
Mm-hmm.
tomato leaves are toxic,
Mm.
as are uncooked potatoes. They both contain a chemical, I don't know if I'll pronounce it correctly, solanine or solanine, that can cause some heart failure and damage red blood cells.
Hmm.
And then to end the list here, uncooked rice. Cooked rice is okay.
Oh,
Wild mushrooms.
yeah. Here's why on the uncooked rice is because they can eat it, and uncooked rice is small. Once you add water, it expands, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can block their digestive system.
Yeah.
They're not going to, there's the old rumor of, the weddings and you throw rice and the pigeons are going to eat it and explode. That's not the case, but they can have some digestive blockage issues.
Yeah.
So avoid that. And then wild mushrooms or mushrooms that are safe for human consumption are fine, but any mushrooms that might be toxic to people are also toxic to chickens. And then an uncommon one to most would be xylitol. So the artificial sweetener
Uh,
is also toxic.
well, and here's the deal with xylitol. We all should avoid it too.
Yes. Well, yes. Like I
It's
said, if it's bad for us, it's probably bad for your
Yeah,
chickens.
exactly. Exactly. All right, so there's a list, and I'll bet you can get me that list for the show notes page.
I sure can.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you. So then, really, it's fair game for everything else.
For the most part, there's a few things here and there that should be avoided. I'm always working on updating this list if for some reason I find something. I know I've had some people message me that have lived in other countries and they have a fruit that I've maybe
What's
never
that?
seen before.
Right.
Exactly. So I'll look it up and update as I come across these strange things. But as far as foods here in America that we're pretty much anything else is fair game.
Yeah.
You can start feeding your chickens treats as young as about 2 weeks. But if you are feeding little chicks treats, you need to make sure to give them grit so that they can digest those treats.
Ah, yes. And what is
But
grit?
so grit is some basically rocks or pebbles of a certain size. Obviously, chicks would get a finer sized pebbles than bigger chickens. And since chickens don't have teeth, they have a gizzard, which is kind of a muscly pouch where food passes through. And when they eat those pebbles are stored in their gizzard. And when food goes through there, the muscles kind of contract and grind the food down on those rocks so that they can absorb the nutrients.
You want to hear something really cool about grit?
Yes.
Usually grit is rocks, right?
Right.
Because you can also get oyster shell,
Right.
right? Well, And the oyster shell is for them to eat and take in the calcium to make the shells
Exactly.
stronger, right? I was at the feed store the other day and I bought some grit that was a mixture of the two.
Oh, there you
So
go.
when I looked at it,
Interesting.
there was broken down, shells in there. I could see small pieces of shells and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that I'm sure that makes it easier to, you just have the one dispenser and then they can peck at it and the right things go to the right places, and so
Right?
that definitely makes it easier.
Yeah. When we did with the grit, we just throw it in with our food.
hmm
Just.
Yeah, you can do that. If you free range your chickens, they probably can get enough.
Yeah.
But if you leave them locked up in a run or a coop sort of thing, then it never hurts to add it into their area, because if they don't need it, they won't take it. But if they need it, it's there.
And then what about feeding eggshells back to them?
Yeah, that's a really common thing. You can definitely do that. A couple suggestions for that would be to lightly bake them in the oven just to remove any potential contaminants or any
Pathogens.
There you go. Yeah, I was going to bacteria and things like that.
Yeah.
So that would be good. And then if you grind it up a little bit, you want it to not completely resemble a chicken egg, because then you could potentially promote egg eating.
Yes, you have to be careful with that. If they can
Yeah.
see that that's an egg, and when I punch it open, there's something good inside.
They are very smart.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Tell me about your podcast and where people can find it.
Sure. So it's called Backyard Bounty. It's available on all podcast players and on YouTube. And if you don't have either of those, you can listen to it on my website, which is heritageacresmarket.com. And it's full of information for new and aspiring hobby farmers, whether it's gardening, raising livestock, talking about growing fruit trees and some other great things in our area. We cover a little bit of everything with fantastic guests like yourself.
Nice. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.